undisciplined, scattered, always chasing the next shiny thing and never seeing one through. Somebody has said a version of that to you, and the worst part is, you've said it back to yourself. You've got skills stacked in 4 or 5 different fields and no single title that fits on a form, and you've quietly decided that's a problem with you. It isn't. It's a specific kind of mind, one that most systems around you were simply never designed to read. And today, I'm going to show you how to recognize it in yourself. There are 8 signs, and I'll tell you now where this ends up, because it reframes everything before it. The specialists own their fields. You were built to own the space between them. Watch for number 5 especially, because it's the one they'll write off as aimless, right up until you hand them the thing none of them could build. Number 6 is the question that makes your stomach drop at parties, and by the end you'll finally know why it does. Before any of that, let's give the other side its full and honest due, because you didn't invent the belief you're carrying. You inherited it, and it's a strong one. The rule is simple. Winners specialize. You choose one mountain, and you climb it for as long as it takes. Malcolm Gladwell pressed the 10,000-hour idea into the culture, drawn from real research on deliberate practice, on the players and musicians who out-trained everyone in a single discipline. Every mentor tells you to niche down and find your one thing. The whole modern economy is built on Adam Smith's insight that a factory gets rich when each worker masters one narrow task instead of trying to do all of them. I want to be fair to that, because a lot of it holds. The heart surgeon, who has done one operation 10,000 times, will save a life that a brilliant generalist would lose on the table. Depth like that is earned, and it's real, and nothing today is going to pretend otherwise. So you ran the comparison, honestly, and it came back ugly. You get pulled into something, you get good, and then the pull fades, and you're gone. Off into the next thing, leaving another half-finished skill behind you. Meanwhile, the people who picked one lane are years deep and climbing. The math looked obvious. They committed and you couldn't, and that gap is the price of your restlessness. But hold that conclusion up to one fact it can't explain. If staying in a single lane is the entire secret to a remarkable mind, why does so much of what changes the world come from people who refuse to stay in theirs? And if you've ever introduced yourself with the phrase, "Jack of all trades, master of none," type this in the comments. I only ever heard half of that sentence. In 60 seconds you'll see why. Here is what the 10,000 hours and the one mountain and the factory floor all quietly agree on. Value is depth, measured inside one boundary. That's a true kind of value. It just isn't the only kind, and it's the one kind your mind was never optimized to produce. Carl Jung spent his career watching what happens to a person who obeys that rule too well. In his commentary on an old Chinese alchemical text, he wrote about the businessman who pours his whole self into one narrow function, wins everything the narrow function can win, and then falls apart the moment he arrives. Jung called it a one-sided exaggeration of the conscious standpoint, and he warned that the parts of you left undeveloped don't vanish. They wait underground, and eventually they come collecting. That restless pull toward too many things at once is the rest of you refusing to stay buried so that one function can shine. There's a name for a mind organized this way, one I'll use for the rest of this video. Integrative intelligence, the intelligence that produces its value between fields rather than inside one. Some nights the screen is the wrong place for this. If you'd rather just listen, Surreal Mind is on Spotify now, the words "in the dark," wherever you are. Links in the description. So here's the strange position you've been in your whole life. Every scorecard put in front of you was measuring depth in one place. which means the intelligence you actually carry was invisible to every test you ever took. Let's make it visible. Sign one, and it's the label you've hit yourself with the hardest. Jack of all trades, master of none. You've said it as an apology, but the thing you've been apologizing with is only half of what the saying originally carried. The longer version people quote finishes very differently. A jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. Now, nobody can hand you a birth certificate for that full line, and its history is genuinely murky, so I won't pretend it's carved in stone. What I'll point at is the edit itself. The flattering half for the specialist survived and traveled everywhere. The half that redeemed the generalist got quietly clipped off and left behind. That's not really about a proverb. A world that hires, ranks, and pays specialists had every reason to keep the encouraging half out of your ears. You grew up hearing the trimmed cut and mistook it for the whole truth, which raises a fair question. If the label was edited to work against you, what else in the story of your so-called scattered life was shaped for someone else's convenience? Start with the habit you feel guiltiest about. Sign 2. You reach the level you were told to aim for. Real skill, hard won, the thing you were supposed to plant a flag on. And instead of arrival, you feel the floor go flat. The pull is already gone, already reaching past this toward whatever's next, and you brace for the usual verdict about yourself. No follow-through. Can't commit. Look closer at that flatness. It's the feeling of a job finishing, and your attention already reaching for the next one. Cicero saw the same rhythm 2,000 years ago, writing about the seasons of a life. Boyhood has its pursuits, he said, and youth doesn't miss them once it arrives. Youth has its pursuits, and the middle years feel no ache for them. Each stage lets go of what it has already used up. Your mind does that, only faster and across whole crafts instead of decades. Jung described the mechanism underneath it plainly. The psyche runs on a finite budget of energy, and once a skill can run itself, that energy gets pulled back out and sent wherever the next real growth is. You didn't quit. Your attention finished paying out on one investment and moved to the next. And here's the edge worth keeping. The specialist who told you to just stay put mostly never make that move at all. The reallocation they diagnose as weakness in you is the exact thing they've never once done themselves. So the wreckage you think you're leaving behind is closer to inventory. Sign 3 is where you start spending it. Sign 3. You crack a problem in one field by reaching into a completely different one. A rhythm from music solves something in a spreadsheet. A pattern from the natural world unlocks a design. And when you show your work, people squint and ask what on earth one has to do with the other, so you learn to hide where the answer really came from. Stop hiding it, because that reach is the most valuable move there is. Almost every genuine breakthrough is a pattern smuggled across a border. The expert planted in the center of one field literally can't see the answer sitting outside it, for the simple reason that he has never stood outside it. You have. You always do. This isn't a pep talk, it's documented. The journalist David Epstein filled a whole book, Range, with cases of generalists outperforming specialists precisely in the domains where the future is unpredictable and the rules keep moving. And researchers looking at Nobel Prize-winning scientists found them far likelier than their peers to also be serious painters, musicians, poets, minds with a second world to raid for ideas. So sit with what's coming apart here. The three things held against you, the range, the fading interest, the constant reaching sideways, are not three separate defects. Laid side by side, they're the working parts of how real discovery actually happens. That is not a coincidence you get to keep waving off. Take stock of what your own head just did. The belief you carried in here, that range is the reason you're behind, has now failed to explain your life 3 separate times, and you can feel yourself unable to just put it back the way it was. That mild pressure behind your eyes right now, that sense of a flaw shifting, is a belief being rebuilt while you hold it. Don't rush out of it. This is the part that actually moves something. The rebuild has a name older than any of the advice you were raised on. Jung called it individuation, and defined it as the development of the psychological individual as a being distinct from the general collective mind, becoming the whole of yourself instead of the one approved sliver that's slotted in cleanly. What the world kept reading as your failure to settle down was this process doing exactly what it exists to do. If that just landed, type it, I was never lost. I was becoming whole. And if this is rearranging something you've carried a long time, subscribe and stay. Pulling the misread parts of a mind into the light and handing them back correctly is the entire reason this channel exists. Sign 4, because it explains the machinery under all of it. Sign 4. You keep catching the same shape in places that supposedly have nothing to do with each other. The structure of a melody and the structure of a market. The same loop driving an ecosystem and driving an argument at dinner. You mention it and get told you're overthinking, or you just get the blank look. The mechanism is this. For most people, the basic unit of knowledge is the fact, filed by subject, sealed in the room where they learned it. For you, the basic unit is the pattern, the shape underneath, which is the whole reason you can pick a solution up in one field and set it down intact in another. That filing system is the gift, not the glitch. It was Jung's method for his entire life. He kept finding the same handful of deep images surfacing in myth, in dreams, in medieval alchemy, in religions that had never touched each other, and where everyone before him had kept those subjects in separate rooms. He read them as one pattern in a dozen disguises. He never kept to his field. He'd worked out that the walls between the fields were mostly a convenient fiction. Get enough of those patterns in one place, and you can do the rarest thing a mind can do. Sign 5. The one I told you to watch for. Sign 5. You take 2 things nobody thought belonged together, and you make a third thing out of them that never existed before. But it's slow, and while it's happening you look lost, like you're wandering with no line to follow, and then it lands, and everyone decides it was obvious all along. What you're running in that slow, formless stretch is the highest value act a mind is capable of. Genuine synthesis. It can't be hurried, and it can't be summoned in a meeting, because it needs many separate pieces held open together until the shape between them finally shows itself. Jung named that capacity the transcendent function. Hold 2 opposing things in tension without forcing a cheap answer, and a third position rises out of the pressure, one neither side could have reached alone. The proof is the man himself. Even as a student, Jung was impossible to file, standing up to lecture a room of classmates on the limits of hard science one week and the nature of religion the next. Then in 1928, a colleague, Richard Wilhelm, mailed him an ancient Chinese alchemical manuscript called The Secret of the Golden Flower. In his own words, real light on the nature of alchemy only began to reach him after he read it, and he said flatly that his encounter with alchemy was decisive for him. Read that for what it is. The framework that made him arrived by way of a dead mystical tradition on the far side of the planet, dropped into modern medical science, 2 worlds no serious colleague would have set on the same shelf. Had he stayed in his lane, he'd be a name in a footnote. Everyone around him mistook the assembling for drift. It was the engine building the thing they'd all need later. But a mind that runs this way pays a toll, and it comes due in one very ordinary place. Sign 6. Someone at a gathering asks you the easiest question there is. So what do you do? And something in you drops, because there's no honest one-word answer. And whatever single thing you reach for feels like a lie the moment it leaves your mouth. You've read that flinch as proof you're unformed, still figuring it out, behind where you're supposed to be by now. Look at the question instead of at yourself. It assumes you're one thing, one role, one heading, one word for a name tag, and that flinch is a part of you refusing to fold your whole self down into a single mask for the room. Jung had an exact term for the mask, the persona. In 2 essays on analytical psychology, he defined it as a complicated system of relations between the individual consciousness and society, a kind of mask designed on one side to make a definite impression on others, and on the other to conceal the true nature of the individual. That mask is precisely what the question wants from you, one clean persona it can file. You can't hand it over, because there's a whole self behind it that has always known it was never meant to be just one thing. If that question has ever made you freeze, type it. I finally understand why I can't answer, "What do you do?" The flinch was never yours to fix. The question was built for a specialist, so of course it jams when an integrative mind tries to answer it straight. And that jam costs you, out in the real world, in a way the next sign names directly. Sign 7. You get underestimated, overlooked, passed over, tagged as hard to place. Then the work finally connects. It pays off, and the same people who couldn't find a slot for you decide they knew it all along. This is the line in the title, the feeling that society somehow can't handle you. Here's the mechanism under that feeling, and it lands very differently once you see it. The systems around you were built to file specialists. One box on an org chart, one shelf in a bookshop, one line on a form, one word at a party. Every one of them needs you under a single heading, and you don't reduce to a single heading, so the machine reads you as a problem to be managed. But you're not too small for the system. You're unindexable by it. That's the filing cabinet coming up short, and it says nothing about the mind it couldn't hold. Jung drew the line straight through this. He set individuation, becoming a self distinct from the collective, against the pull to stay a legible unit of it. And he described the persona, that one clean mask, as really just a slice of the collective mind dressed up to pass as a whole person. Systems can read a slice. What they have no draw for is a person who declined to be one. That friction you've carried your whole life is the sound of a whole self refusing to be filed as a fragment. Once you see that, the last piece of the old story falls apart, the piece where you keep starting over. Sign 8. You've lived what feel like several separate lives, different careers, maybe different cities, whole versions of yourself picked up and set down, and under it runs a low guilt, like you keep hitting reset while everyone you know quietly built one sensible thing that lasted. You were never hitting reset. Each life carried the one before it inside. The pattern library you built in one world came with you into the next, which is exactly why the synthesis from sign 5 keeps deepening every time you move. Most people get one identity and guard it for 50 years. You've been folding several into one larger whole. The clearest proof of how that looks from the outside is Jung's own story. At the height of his career, he was the crown prince of psychoanalysis, Freud's chosen heir, holding the future of an entire movement, and he walked away from all of it. He broke with Freud, gave up the safe position and the ready-made legacy, and spent years afterward looking to his colleagues, like a man who had thrown his own mind overboard. He didn't rebuild the old career. He built a new field out of the wreckage of the first one, and that reinvention, the one that looked like self-destruction while it was happening, is the reason we still say his name. What the world calls starting over from the inside was the only way the next thing could arrive. Which means the story you've been telling about your own life has been running backwards this whole time. Let me turn it the right way around. Set the 8 of them next to each other, and they stop being separate quirks. They're 8 windows onto one design, a mind whose whole worth is the connection between fields, described 8 ways by people who only ever had instruments for measuring depth inside one. What you've been treating as 8 private failures was always one kind of mind, seen from the outside and misnamed. And now you can see the reason none of them ever caught it. Their instruments weren't built to. A resume, a title, a 10,000-hour lane, the question at the party, every one of them is calibrated for the specialist's kind of worth. Point that at you and it returns a low number, not because there's little there, but because it's reading for the wrong thing entirely in the wrong place. You took that low number personally for years. It was never about you at all. The instrument was simply built to read something else. Feel the actual shift, because it's better than being told you're special. You can see the machinery now. Why the reward vanishes the second you master something. Why your answers arrive wearing another field's clothes. Why the simplest question at a party stops you cold. Why they keep underrating you until the moment they can't. 20 minutes ago, those were 4 unrelated things you disliked about yourself. Now, they're one mechanism you understand from the inside. That understanding is the part you keep. Jung put the whole of it in one line. The self, he wrote, is our life's goal, the completest expression of that fateful combination we call individuality. Not the mask, not the one clean answer for the name tag, the whole of it. Every voice around you asked you to become very good at one thing. You were quietly busy with the larger job. You were becoming the whole of what you are. So here's what actually changes, starting the next time it comes up. The next time the reward vanishes on a skill you've mastered, you don't call yourself a quitter. You recognize a finished job and you follow the energy out on purpose. The next time you drag an answer in from some unrelated corner and someone asks what it has to do with anything, you stop apologizing for where it came from, because that reach is the whole point of you. And the next time somebody asks what you do, and you feel that old drop in your stomach, you can let it drop, because now you know it's the sound of a self too large for the box the question was handing you. You don't have to become smaller to be legible. You get to build a life around the one thing you can do that no specialist in the room ever will. The specialists own their fields. You were built to own the space between them. So before you go, tell me one thing. Out of the 8, which one landed like it was written about you, the one you've spent years apologizing for? Put its number in the comments and read a few of the others while you're there, because someone right above you has been carrying the exact same one in silence. Thank you for watching. See you in the next dimension. Empaths aren't broken. They're alchemists in progress. The Alchemist's Path gives you drills, Jung-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to turn overwhelm into clarity. By Surreal Mind, 236-page downloadable ebook in stock. Begin now at thesurrealmind.com.